One of the most perplexing or confusing parts of the essay is how to start it. In an earlier video, which is linked below, I suggested that you should begin by forming a thesis statement. Having a thesis statement makes creating the first lines of the introduction much easier. Before we get to the first lines of the essay, let's talk about their function. What is the purpose of the opening? First, it's to catch the reader's attention. This is the most common answer, but might not be the most important reason. Conversely, and an idea you rarely hear discussed, but should be mentioned, to assist the reader in determining whether the essay will be of interest to them. This is important since you don't want to waste the reader's time with something that is uninteresting. It can hurt your credibility as a writer, especially if you mislead them with an opening that doesn't accurately portray your essay topic. Finally, the purpose of the opening is also to establish the importance of the essay. It must be something that is helpful or meaningful to the reader and not purely esoteric. Now that we've established the various functions of the opening, let's look at how to start the essay. Step 1. Create your thesis statement, as I've already suggested. Let's take this one as an example. Only electric cars should be allowed in the city center during work hours. So this will be an opinion or argumentative essay, one that you will argue or try to prove. Step 2. Determine the main ideas or topics of your thesis statement. In our present case, we have the following: electric cars, or electricity and cars, the city center, or cities, business hours, which we will define as Monday to Friday, 9 to 6 p.m. Now, if we want to place these ideas in general categories, this helps us to conceptualize possible openings. So, electric cars falls under the general categories of energy and transportation. The city center might be geography, and business hours come under one of several categories: time, as in daytime, or an aspect of sociology. Step 3. Determine which of these areas is most important to your essay. If they are equally important, which they might be, then you ask yourself which area will occupy most of your thesis. If there is still no clear answer, then you are free to pick an opening from any one of the three categories. But in our case, not all points are equal. Energy and transportation, that is, electric cars, are the most critical elements of our thesis statement. Time and place, or city center during business hours, are of secondary importance. Now, let's discuss the possible types of openings that we can use and match them with one or more of the categories just mentioned. First, important or relevant context. This is probably the most common opening, but deceptively difficult, since you must focus on the correct context in order for your introduction to make sense. Let me give you an example of a great context, a good context, and a poor contextual opening. Let's start with poor. Business hours are the times when cities make the most money. Banks and other financial institutions are open for big business and large transactions. Why is this a poor opening for my essay? It indeed focuses on one aspect of the thesis statement, business hours, but then moves further from the topic of environmentally friendly cars in city centers. Here's good context. City centers of the largest metropolitan areas of the world have seen vast improvements in their infrastructure over the last several decades. New interstates, underground and overground subways, trams, and exclusive bus lanes have appeared. All of these technological innovations have improved the quality of life for those in the city center. This is a good opening since it touches more centrally on the core of the essay, which is about the quality of life in the city through technological innovation, more specifically through transportation. However, it ignores the all-important aspect of the electric car, which is a technological innovation that is different from the ones discussed above. Thus, the transition to the thesis statement will be slightly awkward. Here's the best opening. Automobiles have done more to transform city life than any other form of transportation. It has influenced where people live, how far they are from work, and how much the city expands. There have also been negative effects of the increase of cars moving within the city center, increased air pollution being foremost among them. This intro is best because it more accurately forecasts the argument of the essay. In other words, the transition from the opening to the main idea of your essay is smooth and natural. This is an indication of an appropriate contextual opening. Let me say it again because this is an important concept. The best openings flow naturally and logically towards your thesis statement. Statistics are another way of creating an interesting opening as you set up your argument. Look at this example. The number of cars in Moscow grew by more than 5% last year alone, for a total of 4.5 million. This is a very good opening because it has the right focus: cars. It will then be an easy transition from an increasing number of cars to an increase in the air pollution to the need for electric cars in the city's most congested areas, the city center, at peak times. That is, during working hours. If we open with a statistic on a secondary point, such as business hours or the city center, then the transition to the main argument is not as smooth. Look at this example. The population of Moscow has doubled in the last 60 years. Here the focus is on population, which is only indirectly related to air pollution resulting from increased car usage. The opening will require more explanation to get to your point because its focus is different. Thirdly, a definition can be an interesting opening. This involves defining a key term in the essay. If the key term is fairly clear, as in the case of the electric car, then it is not a good opening to use. The only term that might be unclear in our example is what we mean by the city center. Business hours are fairly uniform throughout the world and don't require defining. So this option of definition would produce a substandard opening. If the essay is not very long, or if the thesis statement is somewhat surprising, then you might want to begin with your main idea and make a bold, dramatic entrance. Only electric cars should inhabit large city centers of the world by 2030. This claim might surprise the reader and it might attract their interest. A less common but compelling opening is that of the counterpoint. This means to begin with an idea that is contrary to your thesis. Consider this opening. The famed inventor of electricity, Thomas Edison, and others of his generation were unable to find better alternatives to the gas-powered cars. Like many products before and after, the electric car was a technological success that found no more than a minuscule or tiny market. It was a spectacular flop or failure. That was the 1920s. This is the 2020s, and the situation has changed dramatically. Today, car preferences no longer revolve exclusively around gas-powered speed. Environmental and health concerns have gradually come to dominate market considerations. Here we have a statement from a century ago which contradicts the point that you'll make about car choices. The segue or transition to your main point is straightforward. Which of the 5 openings do you like? Important or relevant context, a statistic, a definition, a main idea, or a counterpoint? Which have you used before in an essay or a speech? These openings are, of course, relevant to public speaking as well. So, what have we learned in this video? First, your opening line should be derived from and linked to your thesis statement. Second, your choice of openings depends on the topic. Some openings lend themselves better to your essay than others. We learned in our example that a definition would not be very interesting, but opening with a counterpoint most definitely would. Finally, experiment with different openings to expand your repertoire and learn more about your inclinations as a writer. If you enjoyed this video, tell a friend who needs to improve as a writer or speaker about this video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the notification button. Thanks for watching, and be sure to watch every Tuesday for the newest video in the academic writing series. See you.